is Jessica Shaw. I host the Pop Culture Spotlight on Sirius XM, and it is such a profound pleasure and honor to be here to talk about All the Light We Cannot See, which premieres. You got to see the first two, and the other two are equally exceptional, November 2nd on Netflix. I am so thrilled to be able to be here with some of the creative team behind this, so let's bring them all out. Let's start with Dean Zimmerman, the editor. Tobias Schliessler, director of photography. Whoa! Woohoo! Simon Elliot, production designer. Lucy Bevan, casting director. Dan Levine, executive producer. Shawn Levy, director of All Four and executive producer. And we have Stephen Knight. Can you all see Stephen?
There he is.
There's Stephen zooming in for us.
It's some ungodly hour wherever you are, right, Steve? I feel like this audience needs to know the devotion to the work. What time is it where you are?
It's 1 o'clock, 1 a.m.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you for being a part of this.
We will only hold you to being like 80% coherent. How about that? Shawn, let's start with you. What was it about this extraordinary book? Obviously, Anthony Doerr's Pulitzer Prize winning, 8 bazillion weeks on the bestseller list, an incredible but complex book. What was it about this that made you want to adapt it?
Well, for one thing, I read the book and I fell in love with the book, not as a filmmaker. I read it with no eye towards an adaptation or making it. I just read it as a reader and I loved it. And what I loved about it was that it was both a page turner and suspenseful in the way that it cross-cuts this story of two young people who are almost kind of headed towards an intersection of their fates in wartime, and that it was therefore both taut and engaging, but also really emotional. For me, it was these ideas, and I shared some of them before you had any context for these ideas, but just this idea of how do you preserve humanity in an inhumane time? And I thought that those were rich and important ideas, and I wanted to be a part of it.
Dan, tell us about getting the rights to this, to the book, because when you, and Shawn, I know when you first read it, the rights were not available, and it was just one of those, just reading a book for reading a book, and then they did. What was that like, saying like, oh my gosh, we can actually do this now?
Well, we had fallen in love with the book, and we were late in getting the rights. As soon as we fell in love, we checked, and someone had the rights. But as producers, we've learned to be patient and wait. And one day we got a tip that the rights were lapsing, and it may have been a couple years. They were trying to make it as a feature film, trying to compress this story into 2 hours. And once we found out the rights were available, then the calls to the agent started, and I began a long courtship with Ron, and just called him every day. And at the time, he and Anthony Doerr didn't think that it was right for the screen. They felt that, you know what, we tried, it's just best to leave it as is. We just convinced them that, you know, there was a longer runway, Limiteds had started to take off, Chernobyl came out, and eventually got an audience with Anthony Doerr, Shawn, and I, and you never know what to expect with an author. You know, if someone wrote something this brilliant, we picture some like dark brooding soul, and we got this warm, lovely guy, and from the first Zoom we connected, and here we are.
Because the whole pitch was, we don't want to shrink it, we want to do justice to it. And then, of course, the key component was who could possibly be good enough to adapt this epic and emotional story, and we lucked into Mr. Knight.
Yes, thank you for teeing me up. Stephen, tell us about that. I mean, it's interesting that Dan, you talked about how it could have been a movie, and here it is as 4 episodes, and I'm curious how you approach that with a book that goes back and forth with time, jumps time, and it jumps whose story is, you know, the alternating chapters, and how did you approach that in the writing of these 4 episodes?
With trepidation, because when you read something that's this good, and the novel is exceptional, obviously you have to first of all, adjust your expectation about how you're going to approach this, but also, as you said, the time jumps and the changes of point of view are a real challenge. But then I think we all decided that we didn't want to duck away from that. We didn't want to sort of swerve that. We wanted to embrace it. And so there is a complexity to how it's presented. And it's the strength of the characters, I think, that binds it all together, because that's what is required, is something that binds the whole narrative. And those two central characters are so strong, they're so representative of youth, I think, which is important, and they are both representative of hope in a time that was pretty hopeless. And I think that the times we're living in at the moment mean that something like this, I hope, does resonate with people.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the two leads and the entire cast. We need to just talk about the cast for a second. I mean, let's start with Aria, Mia Liberty, who plays Marie-Laure. Lucy, tell us about the casting. Tell us about finding her. Tell us about, you all got to see Nell, who plays young Marie, and who's extraordinary. Just tell us about assembling this cast.
We did a global search. It was a great challenge and such an excitement to work with Shawn and to cast a lead with blindness, which hasn't been done before on this scale. So that was a massive challenge, and it was a global, and we found Nell in rural Wales, and we found Aria at Penn State University.
She's a Fulbright scholar and has a PhD, right?
She was so bright, yes, clearly apparent from the moment we met her. But we learned so much about blindness through the audition process, meeting and working with Nell first, and then Aria. And so we really learned a lot, didn't we, Shawn, about it was so the senses that Nell used. She was always picking up props when she was auditioning with us, like feeling the different rocks. And we learned a lot as we went along.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, since you've just watched the episodes, I remember Zooming with Nell and the way that she used her hands. First of all, I remember noticing the size of her hands was so, I loved that girl. And in fact, Nell was cast before Ruffalo, before Hugh Laurie, before Aria, before Lewis. Nell was a linchpin. And it's why I think that, as I said up front, I knew that we wanted to have authenticity in the casting, but I didn't anticipate how much we learned about the experience of this girl and this young woman. Because how many of us have spent days and months with someone whose experience is so radically different than ours? And to Lucy's credit, we got, I mean, I don't know how many hundreds, but thousands. Okay, so I've been lowballing that in every interview. I apologize.
It was a lot.
Your job was much harder than I realized.
It was a lot.
Thousands of readings to find a needle in the haystack. Because again, if you decide you're going to open this up to someone who is blind, you're not calling the regular agencies, right? Because these opportunities have not been a part of our industry for its 100 years. And so we really had to find people in places where no one looks.
Yeah, we did that. I mean, this is where social media is a good thing. You know, social media was hugely helpful for us, and also we could have targeted all the blind kind of organizations and charities and communities, you know, really, really globally. And there was so much excitement that this was happening amongst people. People were so pleased to audition. They were thrilled to audition, and they would tip off their friends. And Aria found out about the audition from a teacher of hers who taught her when she was younger. And she'd seen it on social media, and she got in touch with Aria, who loved the book. So there really was a sense of excitement amongst the blind community that this was happening.
Do you remember seeing Aria's, I mean, she recorded it on her phone and sent it in. Do you remember watching it, and was it one of those, okay, yeah, this is it?
She was so composed. She's so stylish too, but
she was wearing her grandma's clothes, right?
She always wore a vintage collar, and she was incredibly composed. And then when we spoke to her, so articulate and so intelligent, and just incredible grace, and just could take direction. The moment we started working with her, and Shawn working with her, you would give her a note, and she would just make the check.
Yeah, I mean, to make no mistake, she did not know what she was doing. She is fiercely smart, but as soon as she got the part, one of the first things she said to me was, I want to be great. I do not know what to do. So be honest, tell me how to be great. And I'm going to try to be great. And every day, her invitation for candor, that takes a lot of fortitude. But that's what this young woman has. She is strong and she is fiercely smart. And she knew the scale of the opportunity and she wanted a chance at being great. And she devoted herself to it.
And she asked so many questions, and she encouraged us to ask questions to her. She wanted us to learn, and to, which we did. So she was a pleasure.
Simon, I want to ask you, the look of these 4 episodes is so stunningly beautiful. You filmed in Budapest, which doubles as Paris in 1940, as Saint-Malo. And I mean, the details, like, I feel like you could be in the attic and you know even how it smells. I mean, like, it's just the wallpaper, the way the books are placed, just every single thing. What was your inspiration? What was your, what were you going for?
Well, Shawn and I, right from the beginning, talked about a visual poetry. And it was really important that the piece looked beautiful, so that as the story develops, you feel the loss. So there is a loss of that beauty as well. So that was very important in kind of approaching a look. That attic actually did smell, because I was lucky enough in Budapest. We bought an old barn, and it became very apparent and important.
Did you say you bought a barn?
We bought a barn, yes.
Another fact I did not know. I was clearly distracted.
Dan, did you know that as the producer?
That a barn was purchased?
It's very cheap.
I wanted to wait till tonight to find out.
I love authenticity, and sometimes when you're trying to capture the patina of age and that beauty, sometimes as gifted as technicians can be, kind of recreating old timber sometimes can have a falseness to it. So we bought an old barn, and those timbers were used in the attic. And actually it became very important when introducing Ira to the space, because she was able to inhabit the space by the smell, the texture, as she negotiated and committed that space to memory. All those things that we take for granted became so important to her. So actually it became a benefit that we hadn't anticipated. But yeah, I went back to the book, and there are lots of beautiful descriptions in the book that Anthony puts in his beautiful writing. And one thing stuck with me, that was the house was like a spire shell upended. And that was my jumping off point for the house. And that staircase was my starting point. And it became, I kind of sort of threw myself on a rock about that, really, because it's not the most practical thing to have a multi-layered set. Everyone kind of shudders in horror that you're going to slow down production. It's going to be an absolute lighting nightmare. And there's a certain amount of panic, but I fought for it, and we came up with a plan, and thankfully Tobias embraced the difficulties and challenges, as did Shawn. And yeah, that's...
Tobias, do you want to vent about Simon now?
No, we had our moments sometimes, but at the end, Simon always went out of his way and made all the adjustments for my lighting in his sets when I needed them. So we had a great collaboration, and I think it shows. I hope it shows.
There were a few sets that were quite complicated. Yes, the grotto particularly was a very tricky set for everybody.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of filmmakers in this room and producers, and a set like that grotto, you can't do it practically because you don't control tide patterns, you don't control light, you have to keep it safe. It was important to Ari and I that she do all the stunts herself. So there's no stunt double in anything you saw, because Aria felt that if someone who is blind is given that opportunity, she wanted to show that she could do all of that opportunity. And so we had countless meetings where your brain is tired and everyone's getting hot and grumpy, and we had to figure out how to build an underground grotto in a tank, in a parking lot, in Budapest. And it was one of those topics where you watch the show and no one will ever care about the pain of cracking that one. And I should mention, by the way, Jessica, we also filmed in Saint-Malo. I can't remember if there's scenes on the rampart wall and on the beach in those episodes you saw, but that was something that was really important because it's so iconic to the book. And then Simon found is it a medieval town in South Central France?
Yes, it is.
Because Saint-Malo had been bombed, 85% of it was destroyed at the end of the war. So we couldn't shoot the streets in Saint-Malo, and Simon found a town.
It's called Villefranche de Rouergue.
Yeah, it's a hard one. It's not that its pronunciation is that bad. It's actually very awkwardly spelled.
Yes.
But it's a town that has not changed in centuries, and that's where we shot the bakery and all of the ruins and all of those street scenes.
They couldn't have been more helpful. That town rolled out the red carpet for us and enabled us to set fire to cars next to medieval buildings and, torch a carousel in the middle of their cathedral square.
Because no one from Hollywood had ever set foot in that town. So they didn't know that they should have forbidden us from entering those gates. But it was incredible.
They'll know for the next one. I wanted to ask, so many of you factored into this, Shawn, Steve, all of you, but I wanted to ask about the model of Paris, which is just, it's in the book. Anyone who's read the book knows the beautiful words that Anthony wrote about it. It's filmed, it's shot so beautifully, it's built so beautifully. It's, the way it's directed, the pace with which you direct, Mark Ruffalo, the father's showing Marie-Laure how to figure out how to get around. Steve, the way you wrote those scenes, all of it is, it's just so, sorry, Lucy, what?
I was just going to say Mel's little hands.
Yes, Mel's hands. Tell me about figuring that out and cracking that and figuring out, okay, this is how we're going to do it, because it's a model, and yet it's one of the most thrilling things to watch.
I'm going to answer that question, but Steve, I remember reading Stephen's first draft of the first episode. And at that point, I don't even think I was going to direct it. I was going to produce it with Dan and maybe do an episode. But I remember reading those early father-daughter scenes that Stephen wrote in his first draft. And it was so moving to me, the act of love, right, between a dad who is committed to empowering his girl. Regardless of her abilities and disabilities, he wants her to feel capable in the world. And so I want to credit you, Steve, because that was the moment when I read those early Daniel Marie scenes. That was the moment that I knew I had to do the whole thing myself. And I think, Simon, maybe one of the critical decisions early on was, isn't that the kind of thing, a model of a town that in 2023, that's almost always 3D printed, right? This is the way our industry tends to render that. And I know you realized, no, we can't do that.
No, very early on. The first thing we did was we got a map of Saint-Malo and a section of Paris, and we were playing on my office floor, trying to get the right scale, and then that was put onto a table, and then various team members were leaning over, pretending they were various kind of sizes of actors, and then it was how we would generate it. And
did you buy another barn for it?
You're getting the bill later. Yeah. And then it was about how we would make it. And usually for speed these days and for accuracy, things are just scanned into a computer. But the problem with designing these days with computer is sometimes things just have too many straight lines, and you can build some flaws into it, but they just don't feel authentic. And after a few maquettes had come through to my office, it became apparent that we needed to actually make it by hand, out of timber. And that's what we did. I had an amazing prop company in Budapest who put one of their best guys on it, and he basically sat at a work table for a very long time.
House by house.
House by house, kind of just carving those little bits. And yeah, the end result you see on the screen.
True or false? Did Mark Ruffalo, I've heard, learned how to whittle?
Well, he is a craftsman. I will say, this is a weird, I cast Mark because he has such a natural, inherent warmth. So I knew that the paternal, soulful, loving quality would be innate to Mark. What I didn't know is that Mark he likes building things. So he knows his way around. This is where I literally don't know the words of things that a craftsman uses. But Ruffalo did, and wasn't he kind of came to us weirdly fluent in these skills, right?
It's your worst fear when an actor knows the names of tools. and said, I need my chisel and I need my bradawl, came and saw the model and had a session with our prop master, so that when it came to shooting the scene, we had the tools there, and he knew how to handle them, and it obviously the scene is all the better for it.
Are any of Mark's pieces in the model?
Few roofs.
Oh, very nice. Tobias, the whole series is so beautifully, just absolutely beautifully shot. I was wondering if was there a specific scene that kept you up at night of like, oh my God, what camera am I using? How am I gonna do this one? Or a shot even, or the opposite, something that you didn't think would be as rewarding, but it ended up being very meaningful to you?
I give you both. I think the most challenging scene for me was the scene where Werner runs from the bakery to Mary's house, and that was shot over 3 locations. One was in Budapest on stage, outdoor stage, where Simon built this football field long wall, and then we shot inside Merlot, and then we shot in France, and everything had to cut together seamlessly. There was a lot of interactive lighting from the bombs going off and from the fires going off. Background had to match from shot to shot. Immediately you shot it like one shot is in the France, the next shot is in Saint Malo, and it all had to come together with visual effects, special effects, and we spent all the time organizing it, and I think it had to be seamless, and I think it is. At the end. Unfortunately, you haven't seen it yet.
I know, you got to watch episode 3 and 4. That answer will be so much more interesting. Just wait 9 days, guys, and then you can watch episode 3 and 4. You're going to see everything you just described. But Toby, wasn't part of the challenges. We had Simon and Stephen, who had written the script, pretty keenly aware of historical accuracy, i.e. a blackout in wartime. Tell a DP, we need to light our lead actress in an attic in a blackout, but I can't have a blank screen. So all of those cheated conceits of like, could there be a fire burning in the stove? Could there be some firelight coming through a window? I feel like you were a little tormented by the fact that we wanted a gentle, soft quality to the lighting, and yet sometimes we had to work hard to come up with justification, right?
No, we had to see them, so we had to cheat a little bit for sure, and that kept me up at night. But the one shot I have to give everyone, I think that's my favorite shot, and it's not special at all.
Is it in episode 1 or 2? So this audience.
It's in episode 2, when Werner is being driven up to the institute. We did this shot where he's looking outside the window and sees what's coming to him, and we played reflections over his face. It's a very kind of understated shot, but to me, it's one of the shots that really tell the story.
You remember that shot where we're on Werner's face in the Seidler window? And it was just one of those moments where you're in the middle of a take, and we had done research. Simon and our assistant director had done all this research, and they saw this thing that they did at those institutes that's in the show, where these boys would make human chariots piled on top of each other with a rope. And we saw that in a photograph. We trained boys to do those races, and then we angled those running paths relative to the car's path so that we could get the reflection of those chariot pyramids overlaid, all practical, in camera, over Werner taking in this pretty horrific new circumstance he's being delivered into. That's one of my favorites too. Yeah, good choice.
That's incredible. Dean, first of all, I love how many, Shawn, you've worked with so many people before, including Dean, and I love, there must be like a nice shorthands that a lot of you had, but tell me what it was like sitting down and figuring out, okay, we're in the editing room, what's our vision with putting this together?
My job is considerably easier than all these guys. The biggest challenge, I think listen, me and Shawn have been together almost 20 years now, so for us, it's more than a shorthand. It's really just like, I know exactly what he wants his dailies speak to me in a way where I know where he wants me to go and what he wants me to do. So from that perspective, it was kind of just, we followed suit, and performance is first and foremost. The biggest challenge that we had was we had actors that had never acted before. So every single day we are watching them mature and shooting out of order. How do I select the stuff that as an arc of a character will resonate and stay organic and have emotion and all the stuff that I know he wants, and that he's getting on set, but that the moments are so few and far between. The mining you have to do, as we call it, the digging for gold. That's really what kind of separated this job from lots of others, is we were maturing the actors were maturing as they were shooting, so we were doing the same in the editing room as well.
I do have to just sing Dean's praises. You know, literally we did from the Night at the Museum movies through Stranger Things. Dean has been my editor, and what's amazing, and I think your superpower is, it doesn't matter what the tone of the piece is, you find performance moments that will make those actors shine. And your nose for that, like truffle hunting in some ways. Your nose for those beautiful moments, those Nell moments, those Aria moments, even before they knew what they were doing.
Well,
you would just hunt for those moments, and the performance you see is the result of those instincts.
The other huge challenge we also had was just being so sensitive to the subject matter. And you know, when I first read it, it was so powerful. And the moment you see a swastika for the first time on film, it was very impactful. And I actually called Shawn and was like, "Are you okay with this? Like, this is some really heavy material." And obviously, you know, from history, it's something that is so tragic and whatever, but it's a story that we did have to tell. And it was something that was never lost on me, was the importance of really kind of making sure that that threat and that evil was always present, but didn't overpower what the real story was, which is this beautiful character piece between these two.
You also, when you were filming in Budapest, was right when Russia invaded Ukraine, right? And what was, I mean...
Well, Steve, do you want to remember, we had 4 scripts, and we were watching in real time that invasion. And Steve, you should say a little bit about that last wave of revisions that I remember you doing, because we couldn't ignore the topicality.
Yeah, it was quite extraordinary, because you sort of realise that this isn't history. You know, this is human beings. This is what humanity does to itself. And we all felt it was important that that was reflected somehow within the script and within the performances. But it's horrible how a story like this can become relevant almost overnight, and topical almost overnight. And I think all of us, everyone involved in this project, was aware of the magnificence of the book, and also the weight of the material, of what this thing was about. And you know, a generation is coming through now for whom the Second World War feels like ancient history, and something like the invasion of Ukraine, I think, points out the fact that this is what human beings do to each other sometimes, and it's very important that as writers and artists, that we reflect the fact that human beings also respond with magnificence and with beauty and with love and with tenderness. And that's what, for me personally, I hope this thing, you know, all of the hardships that everyone went through to make this, and everyone did such a fantastic job to make this real, is that the message, hopefully self-evident, that in the end, human beings will prevail. And nothing made that more poignant than exactly those events in Ukraine.
That was, thank you. I do one anecdote. In episode 2, is it the scene where Marie and Daniel have to walk out of Paris? So that was a sequence that Stephen had written, I remember Simon showing me research photos of grandmas being transported in baby carriages, Parisians wearing winter clothes in June because they knew they weren't coming back to get the rest. And we were filming that scene, that Exodus scene. And we had Ukrainian refugees who had come west to Hungary to escape an invading neighbor from the east, just like Germany into Paris, who were playing Parisian refugees walking west to escape an invader from the east. True story. And so in that sequence where, you know, Daniel and Marie talk, we had Ukrainian refugees as extras amongst our Parisian refugees.
It's so profoundly impactful to hear you talk about that. Now that this is all done, do you have thoughts on how, do you want people to sit and watch 4 in a row? Do you want people to sort of do this one at a time? I watched 4 in a row. I can't recommend it enough, but I'm curious.
You had the stamina 4 hours straight.
I sure did.
Well, I do know Stephen, one thing Steve did incredibly well is he ended, it's why I mentioned up front, I found the book to be, I couldn't stop reading it. It was the brevity of the chapters. It was the cross-cutting between the boy and the girl, between present and past. And Stephen's screenplays had that same dynamism. And every episode ended with suspense. And I do know we had a lot of fun in the execution, in the edit room, making sure, and again, I've done 4 seasons of Stranger Things, so I know how things work on Netflix. And you want to leave people irresistibly clicking next episode. And so, while there's no pressure, I won't hate you if you do. But yeah, as I said, we wanted something that was beautiful and poetic, but also something that was dense storytelling and kind of irresistibly so.
It is all that. I love, Steve, what you said about, I hope I'm not misquoting you, the magnificence of humanity, which is just such a beautiful way of putting it. And it's a series that ends with despite all of the horror, there's so much hope in it. And I just want to thank everyone so much for coming tonight. All the Light We Cannot See will be on November 2nd on Netflix. And I want to thank this extraordinary.
Thanks for coming out, guys. Thanks for having me. Thank you,
Dan Levine, Lucy Bevan, Simon Elliot, Tobias Schliessler, Dean Zimmerman. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you all so much for coming.